Hello there, YouTube. Devin here again, and today we're going to be talking about one of my kind of favorite countries to collect from and kind of eras to collect from, and I really like the whole World War I era. And this helmet didn't really show up for World War I, but it is heavily influenced based off of World War I, and it is a direct response of World War I, and that would be the Swiss M18. I've got a couple different versions of the Swiss M18 helmet. It's actually one of my favorite helmets. They're still fairly cheap. They're getting more expensive out there. It's a great foray into helmet collecting, is to start getting involved with this, because these aren't as desirable as a lot of other helmets. So they're cheaper because the Swiss, as you know, didn't participate in World War I or II directly anyways. So they have not a lot of intrinsic, like, historical value to them because of that. They're not really associated with anything major. But we're going to go over a whole bunch of different Swiss M18s. I'm going to be changing my hat and stuff throughout the video too, so all that other good stuff, because I really like Swiss stuff, being part Swiss. I really do quite enjoy Swiss military history and their well-battled traditions and all that other good stuff like that, and this policy of aggressive neutrality that has persisted for years with Switzerland that makes them probably, well, a giant contender and problem to deal with throughout history. So basically, going back to Napoleonic times, they were in, like, the Holy Roman Empire and all that other good stuff. Switzerland has always been known for having some very hardy, very good people at fighting. Swiss mercenaries were famous all over the world. They still are some of the most famous mercenaries in the world because the Pope uses them. Every single one of the Swiss Guard, which is why they're called the Swiss Guard, are all Swiss soldiers from Switzerland that the Vatican City pays the Swiss government to have, because they're considered some of the best soldiers in the world, and they have been for a very long time. They used to attack. Switzerland's had some level of autonomy for 500 years. It's comprised of a bunch of different cantons in the mountains in the Alps, in kind of South Central Europe, and it's the only country to avoid basically both world wars entirely surrounded by the world wars. So it's Sweden being another one, but as Norway and Finland didn't really participate, well, at the time Russia didn't really participate in World War I, they get kind of a and they did actually help the Germans in a lot of ways, aid-wise, but that's alright. And Switzerland, though, has always had this aggressive neutrality post, a thing going for it in both World War I and World War II, where basically they're like, we don't care who you are and what your intentions are. This is our home, and we'll kill you if you come in here. To the point where during World War II, the Swiss shot down both German and American bombers that flew over the country. It sparked a lot of bad things, but Switzerland was very apparent. Both sides were outraged by that, actually, every time it happened, but they were like, don't fly over the country. We've told you that. And they're like, how could we tell? It's, you know, it's dark and all the other good stuff, you know, and you get lost and whatever. You get off by a few degrees on a map, and next thing you know, Switzerland's blowing you out of the sky, because they do not care. They want to be left alone. And being entirely surrounded, but Switzerland's like the ultimate epitome of home field advantage, to the point where they've built up their country so militarily to enforce this neutrality, to the point where in World War II, Germany developed this operation called Operation Tannenbaum, which translates to Christmas tree, and they decided against it for a number of different factors, but one of the largest factors is the Swiss had so many bunkers built across their country with interlocking fire and so many different lines of defense, and they mined all the mountain passes and all the railways and all the roads and everything like that, to the point where Germany would have won. They would have taken over Switzerland if they really wanted to bad enough. They could have done it. Even if the Italians helped too. It very easily could have been taken. Switzerland could have been taken, but the Axis would have lost an unspeakable number of men doing so. Like, that's the reason they didn't, to the point where Switzerland was also better, you know, left being neutral, because there was a way for the Germans to process money. The Swiss franc is still considered one of the strongest currencies in the world, and so it was a good way for the Germans to, for one, get stuff out of the country and bring stuff into the country. They were kind of like a money laundering thing, and the Swiss have been known for that for a long time, being a kind of banking solution anyways. But we'll get back to what the video is about, and that is the M18 helmet. Now, the M18 helmet came out obviously in 1918. It is based off of the German Stahlhelm. This is actually an Austrian M17 right here. But you can see the kind of similarities in shape and design and everything like that, where they kind of influence their stuff off of. As you can see, here's the liner of the German kind of helmets. Here's the liner of the Swiss helmets. They're actually pretty quite similar, based off of designs and shapes and stuff like that. But they would also come out with a series of like helmet covers, and there's really 3 different versions of the M18 helmet. Now, the M18 helmet would have started out obviously in its original thing. It would have been painted this kind of dark olive green color that very quickly in the 20s would make way to a gray color that the Swiss would adopt and repaint all of their helmets. It's very hard to find an M18, an original M18, in that original kind of dark olive green color. You see a lot of them in gray if they're from the interwars, which are still pretty rare, and then black. Black is the most common color you will find the M18s in, because a lot of them that survived long enough into the 40s would have been painted black with the new model of M18, not the most recent model, but the new model of M18 that was used throughout all of World War II. But the M18 has a couple different variances, and I'll show you between the two and everything like that when we flip the camera around and all that other good stuff. But the M18 would be used in one form or another from 1918 to 1971, when it would be officially replaced by the M71 helmet. It would stay in service, though, until kind of the late 70s, with some reserve units and civil guard units and all that other good stuff, and engineers and rear line troops and whatnot. The Swiss didn't really ever throw anything away. They kind of used it into the ground until they had enough of it to fully replace something, and then they would surplus all the old stuff out. That's kind of their whole way of doing it, to the point where, like, their rifle, like the M89, their very first kind of like bolt action modern to a degree rifle in that 7.5 Swiss caliber, the M90 cartridge, or whatever it is, the GP90, sorry, cartridge, would serve into the 30s. It was a black powder rifle serving into the 1930s because it wasn't fully displaced out of lines, and then they wouldn't be surplused until basically the 40s. So that's kind of how Switzerland ran with their stuff for a very long time. And in the 40s, they would come out with a different model of M18. It's still called the M18. In collector's market, they really know it as the M18/40. And I'll show you some differences in the liners and kind of the shape of the helmet and whatnot. The covers don't really mean anything. This is a TAS 57 cover for the M18. This is the reversible World War II era cover. They wouldn't have had covers until basically World War II. This would obviously come out in the 50s and be serving with the helmet till the M71 came out. In 1971, like I said, it would be replaced by this, the Swiss M71 helmet, which is kind of a more updated design, has a lot of similar features, has a lot of new features, improved kind of shape and deflection. It's still a steel helmet though, so it's kind of depends on a lot of factors if it's actually a good helmet or not. As far as what's impacting you at the time, how fast it's moving, what angle is it coming in at, and what is it made out of. So it's kind of one of those things. Every steel helmet kind of has to be taken with a grain of salt, because you could have a bad batch of steel or an exceptionally good batch of steel, and the Swiss are known for having fairly good steel, but, you know, at the end, a steel helmet really is designed to stop dirt. So that's about it. It's not really designed to stop anything else. So we'll flip the camera around here now. We'll take a look at the liners between the M18, the M1840, and then the M1840- 57, the Duralumin model, and all that other good stuff. And I'll explain to you some of those differences and all that other cool crap after we flip this, flip the camera around here and all that other good stuff. So stay tuned for that. Alrighty, so we got both the Swiss M18 helmets here right next to each other. So we have an M18 and we have an M1840. Now you can see some kind of differences right away. This is obviously they're two separate colors. This is what would have been a Civil Guard helmet initially, or a Swiss Guard helmet. They would have been wearing yellow at the time as part of their uniform. And it would have been overpainted black for World War II. This one is actually underneath this gray paint. There is that kind of soupy, there's some little marks and dips and dents where you could see that kind of original dark olive green under it. But there is some differences in the liners here. The chin straps didn't really change much. The liners did, though. So as you can see, this is a full band helmet, and that's how the original M18s would have been post-World War I and interwar, and into World War II. You can even see a lot of these into World War II. But it has the full band liner, whereas this has what's called the 3/4 band liner. It's actually more than that, but it's called the 3/4 band liner because it doesn't go all the way around here in the back. And basically that was just to save material. It was just deemed unnecessary is all. Why waste the material if you don't need it? Other than that, you see the kind of the tongue shape has changed a little bit. This obviously has two tongues per pad, and then it's got little grommets here with simple drawstring, whereas this would be changed to just having one tongue per pad, and then there would be a little loop just stitched right into the tongue, and that would create a channel for this drawstring to go through. These did cut into your head kind of bad. The soldiers complained about that, which is why you see a thicker, kind of flatter string on these compared to the World War I ones. There is a difference in leather as well. You can see that this is kind of, you would see a lot later in the leather. The Swiss would continue to use this leather for a long time in their helmets, all the way through the M71. And here you can see kind of the earlier, like, tooled pattern of leather. Like, they printed it and stuff like that, weird. But other than that, the liners are all attached the same way. You can see this little clamp. These two little fingers are just welded to the shell, and then you just bend them around the liner. That didn't really change. So if we look at the tongue here in this one, see the same thing. It's kind of the same whole system. So you would just, to replace the liner, which was pretty easy to do in the field, you would just unbend those, remove the whole liner, drop in a new one, and bend those back. It was pretty easy for a soldier to do. And everything like that. The shell shapes would change. Obviously, I don't know if you could tell here, but the later, so you can have a helmet, an earlier M18 that would have this liner, and it would be updated. It could be black and everything, have this liner and all that other good stuff. It needed to go in for repair. But how to tell if yours is one of the older ones is you see how this is kind of a shallower swoop and it's kind of rounded here. That's indicative of an earlier one, where if you look at this one, it's a steeper swoop, it's kind of more pointed. That's an easy way to tell the difference. It's hard to tell on camera, but this one's a little pointed, a little more pointed than the other ones. So you could also tell that this one is smooth in paint and this one is rough. That's another way to tell, because really the only paint job they had that was rough on their helmets was the original M18s, because they didn't have covers, so they needed to reduce the shine. Whereas after the M40s came out, they would have pretty much always had covers for the most part. Kind of at the end of World War II, that would come out to be more common enough. The covers technically did come out during the beginning of World War II, but you don't see them in enough numbers or really in enough use until the end of World War II. Which is probably good for the Swiss, because this type of helmet would have stood out quite a lot, actually. During World War II, if it rained or something like that, it would end up very, very shiny. And then we'll move this one out of the way and just show you where the influence again came from in the Austrian M17 helmet here, which is made in Germany. German-style Stahlhelm liner. You can see that this is a very heavily influenced based off the Stahlhelm helmet. And all that other good stuff. It's a very, very neat design. There's a lot of different variations you can collect. You can get different combinations of parts kind of thrown in these, depending on who fixed it and what era it went back to get fixed, or if it was updated or not. There's a lot of weird varieties you can get in Swiss gear, and all that other good stuff. So hopefully this is kind of something you could see here. Now, the only difference between all three versions of the M18 where the actual steel helmet would change. So these are all just Swiss steel, the M18, the M1840, but then there's the M1840-57, and that is a helmet that's made out of duralumin, which is like a steel alloy designed to be kind of lighter, or it's like an aluminum alloy. It's some kind of weird metal alloy that's supposed to be as strong as steel but lighter and not rust as quick anyways. So it's just weird kind of thing that the Swiss had. They didn't make a ton of them, and they would I have a video on that one if you're interested. And the Swiss would issue those for just a little bit. They didn't make a ton of them. They realized it was kind of too much work and too expensive to make, and they would eventually just keep using the steel ones. By that point, they had enough helmets between bulking up for 2 world wars, basically, that they really didn't need to change a new helmet. It was ultimately decided that rather than going with this design, they would start designing a new helmet kind of by the time those started to phase in. So it just wasn't really necessary, but you can still find those out there. So we'll flip the camera around now. We'll take a look at these 2 helmets kind of side by side being worn and all that other stuff, and wrap the video up then. Alrighty, so, well, now I got the covers off the helmets for you, so you can see what the both versions, both the most common versions of the M18 kind of look like right next to each other, and all that other good stuff together. As you can see here, at a better angle that the 1940 version is kind of a pointier kind of slope right here than the M18, the true M18. So other than that, not much changed on the shape. 2 vent holes here in the back, much like the German kind of Stahlhelm thing, except rather than being on the sides, they're here in the back, which is actually really good because as a soldier you're facing this way, and that's leaving the 2 compromising points in the shell towards the back of the helmet. So if anything coming at you from a front direction, which should be the way you're facing if you're engaging an enemy, it's keeping those compromising points towards the back of the helmet, where they will hopefully get the least amount of exposure. That didn't change throughout the design, but as you can see, the smooth paint would become kind of a feature with the later M18s. The shells, I mean not the shells, the covers here, this is the cover that would come out during World War II. It is a reversible summer and fall type, so like this would be the fall-winter side, and then this would be the spring-summer side. It's based off of the German kind of World War II interwar era paratrooper helmet, that kind of really blocky with the little raindrops in it, as you can see. That would be very common until the late 50s, when they would come out with the Alpenflage, the very first version of Alpenflage, TAS 57. This cover is non-reversible, as you can see, held in place with hooks rather than a drawstring, and all that other good stuff, which is one of the very first widely adopted IR defeating camouflages, based off, again, once a very late World War II German design. And the Swiss would still use this pattern to this day, but in a slightly different kind of color way, so it doesn't have all this red in it anymore. Cool stuff about the M18 and all that other good stuff. I hope you did learn something here today. I'm now going to show you what the helmets look like being worn. Both of them shouldn't be too different or extreme as far as like shapes would go, but we'll show you how they look anyways. So here we have the original M18 from the front, from the side, from the rear, and as you can see, this one has a fairly high kind of swoop skirt in the back, unlike the German Stahlhelms and stuff. So when you go prone, it doesn't dig into your neck. It doesn't have any bite, which is a very good design for something that's this early. That's not really something you see all that often. A helmet this well designed. It still has obviously great coverage down the sides of the head and everything like that, which is probably why they use this helmet for over 50 years. So so we'll flip now and we'll see what this looks like with the M18-40. So as you can see, it's pretty much the same exact helmet. Not much going on here as far as changes go. This helmet I'd say this liner is a little bit more comfortable just because the drawstring at the top and the way the pads are shaped, it doesn't cut into your head as well. I could only imagine having to wear this for days on end without hair, having worn a helmet for years without hair. That little donut at the top can mean the world to you, especially even on a steel helmet. So a lot of people who've never held a military helmet before think steel helmets are heavy. But steel helmets are actually really, really light compared to like Kevlar and other composite helmets. They're really, really heavy. And so having that little donut ring where a lot of the weight on your head is sitting in basically that rim. It's where a lot of the weight is being focused on your head. So when you have something like this, where you got these little grommets and this very, very thin kind of drawstring, it's like cutting into your head almost. If you're wearing it for a long time and it kind of slumps down, you know, as the pads kind of wear out and compact, like these are, because these are old helmets, and they wear into your head basically, and that's a design feature that kind of stuck around for too long. It would even carry over into the M71 helmet, as you can see here, what the Swiss replaced the M18 with. So hopefully you all will like this video and you subscribed if you like this sort of thing. Hopefully you learned something about one of my favorite helmets and all that other good stuff, because I quite enjoy Swiss helmets. I absolutely adore them and everything. I have quite a few of them, quite a few Swiss hats, quite a few Swiss uniforms, quite a few Swiss camouflages, a lot of gear, Swiss rifles, Swiss bayonets, a ton of weird Swiss stuff, and I absolutely adore it and all that other good stuff. If you think I'm worth a contribution, it means the world to me. I haven't got any new Patreon supporters in months. It's a really, really cool way to support the channel. It goes a long ways. And you get access to the Discord if you're a Patreon supporter, where you can see all of my other Patreon supporters share cool stuff with me, talk about food, alcohol, guns, bayonets, camouflage, military history in general, tons of neat stuff. I've learned so much from my Discord members actually, and I'm sure vice versa. And it's just a really cool place to hang out throughout the day if you've got nothing better going on. There's always something interesting to see on there. If that's something that interests you, becoming a Patreon member is a great way to support the channel and get the most access to me. So I just sent out a whole bunch of packages actually to my Patreon supporters, stuff that I've been meaning to do for a long time. So since I finally had access to get printer ink that I needed and time off to get to the post office, can't leave anything here because people will steal it. So thank you all for watching. Once again, if you think I'm worth a contribution, I'll have a little link you can copy right to my Patreon in the description of this video and all that other good stuff. If you can't do that, that's totally fine. Just watch the video, subscribe if you can, get notifications, leave a comment, like, you know, all that other good stuff. It really helps in the algorithms, which makes YouTube have to pay me more money, which I really, really like, because their stuff fluctuates so much. There's months where I make good money and a lot of months where I make next to nothing, just for no seeming apparent reason, just because the algorithms. So the more you like the video, the more you comment and interact, the more likely it is to appear in like suggested videos for other people and stuff like that, which means I get more views. So thank you so much for watching, you guys. Once again, I'm sorry this didn't come out yesterday. Just didn't have any motivation yesterday, and I was super busy actually. So thanks for stopping by. Hopefully I can see all of you in the next video and see some new people on the Discord here, hopefully. That'd be absolutely fantastic, considering I haven't had any new contributors and Patreons for quite a while. So talk to you all later. See you in the next video. Bye-bye now.